Welcome to our in-depth look at the rapidly changing global landscape of trade, energy, and technology. In the past few days, the return of Donald Trump to the US presidency has triggered a new series of tariffs, sparking confrontations not only with traditional allies like Canada and European nations but also reigniting the fierce economic rivalry with China. At first glance, the headlines revolve around loud, high-profile tariff announcements, 25% here, 10% there, on imports that range from steel and aluminum to automobiles. Yet beneath these high-decibel disputes lie quieter, more subtle tactics that could rewire entire industries. Several forces are converging at once. Canada, which has historically relied on the US to buy around 75% of its exports, now aggressively courts new trade partners in Europe and Asia. Across the Atlantic, tensions within the European Union are reaching new heights. Leading politicians like German Chancellor Olaf Scholz publicly clash with Trump's administration, while fractures within Europe deepen over economic stagnation, soaring energy costs, and concerns that Washington might sideline them in peace negotiations with Russia. Some analysts even question Germany's ongoing commitment to the EU amid its worst economic downturn in decades. Meanwhile, on the Pacific front, a quiet but powerful strategic realignment is happening. Beijing has begun restricting exports of certain critical minerals and advanced lithium processing technologies essential to the fast-growing electric vehicle EV industry. China's strategy is less about loud statements and more about quietly turning off the technology taps to hamper Western supply chains. In this video, we'll unpack how these simultaneous dynamics, from explosive tariff feuds to discrete export controls, are redrawing the contours of global power. When Donald Trump first took office in 2017, he took aim at countries running trade surpluses with the United States, threatening high tariffs to pressure partners like Canada, Mexico, and China into renegotiating deals. Although many of those disputes seemed to cool after the first phase of the US-China trade deal and the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA, the 2024 election brought President Trump back to the White House. Immediately, he reignited tariff threats. Within weeks of his return, Trump announced a blanket 25% tariff on Canadian imports, ostensibly to address illegal immigration and drug trafficking, a justification that puzzled many analysts, given Canada's historically strict border policies. In response, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau condemned these moves as unjustified, pointing out that they contradict USMCA rules. He also insisted Canada would respond with equivalent countermeasures, hitting select US goods and pivoting toward new trade partners. The Trump administration simultaneously targeted European steel and aluminum with new duties, triggering alarm in major EU capitals. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen warned that further escalation could severely damage transatlantic ties. Many in Europe, already wary of American unpredictability, began doubling down on their own trade deals, including the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, CETA, with Canada. Recent data shows that merchandise trade between Canada and the EU has surged over 65% since CETA's provisional application in 2017. That momentum could accelerate if more European companies see Canada as a reliable partner for energy, minerals, and advanced technology in place of the United States. For decades, Canada's economy was oriented overwhelmingly toward its southern neighbor, with nearly three-quarters of Canadian exports heading to the United States. While this close relationship brought prosperity and stability, it also made Canada highly vulnerable to sudden policy shifts in Washington. When Trump's new round of tariffs landed, Canadian leaders took swift action to diversify. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Trade Minister Mary embarked on a whirlwind diplomatic tour of European capitals, highlighting the importance of the Canada-EU Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, CETA. Since CETA's provisional application, two-way merchandise trade has soared beyond 65%. Canada is now determined to harness this momentum. Officials in Ottawa are also looking across the Pacific, signing new or updated trade agreements with Indonesia, Ecuador, and other emerging markets. The goal is to reduce Canadian exposure to the US market by at least 50% compared to 2018 levels. Beyond formal trade deals, Canada has rolled out programs to help small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs, tap into foreign markets. The Can Export program offers up to $75,000 in financial support for SMEs exploring new export destinations, including virtual trade missions and specialized help in meeting compliance standards. Meanwhile, Ottawa is working to dismantle internal trade barriers among its own provinces, hoping that a more integrated domestic market will help Canadian companies strengthen before facing competition abroad. In short, the ongoing tariff crossfire with the US is pushing Canada into a new era of trade diversification, forging alliances that could reshape global supply chains for everything from energy to tech services. Across the Atlantic, the European Union faces its own set of challenges. Stubbornly high energy costs, declining industrial output in key economies like Germany, and fluctuating global trade dynamics have spurred discontent across member states. Inflationary pressures and fears of long-term stagnation are giving rise to political upheavals. In Germany, long touted as the economic engine of Europe, manufacturing orders have plummeted, and a wave of company bankruptcies is affecting the bedrock small and medium-sized Mittelstand businesses. These deepening issues coincide with what many in Europe perceive as an unreliable US partner. President Trump's remarks at the Munich Security Conference, criticizing European leaders for suppressing free speech and failing to address migration, were widely condemned. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz fired back on social media, decrying the intrusion into domestic politics, especially Trump's Vice President J.D. Vance's public meeting with far-right political figures in Germany. Even more alarming for European unity, Trump has floated ideas like excluding the EU from major international negotiations, particularly over Ukraine, raising concerns that Washington is prioritizing its own strategic advantage over decades-old alliances. France's President Emmanuel Macron, too, has been vocal about the need for greater European, strategic autonomy. He convened a special meeting to discuss defense coordination amid fears that the US might engage in back-channel negotiations with Russia on Ukraine, potentially sidelining Europe. Countries like Norway, Canada, Lithuania, and Greece have been invited to expand the conversation beyond just the biggest EU nations. The aim is to shape a more cohesive security architecture, less reliant on transatlantic ties, and better suited to protecting European interests if Washington's policies diverge. For European leaders already contending with economic woes and energy supply struggles, the sense of unpredictability from the US underscores the urgency to fortify their internal resilience. Germany stands at the heart of Europe's ongoing turbulence. Once hailed as the world's export champion and an anchor of the European economy, Germany's industrial might has wavered. Economic growth went negative in 2023, contracting by 0.3%. Projections for 2024 showed another decline of 0.2%, signaling a sustained recession rather than a mere hiccup. High energy prices, driven in part by reduced Russian gas supplies, have hammered German industry. Power-intensive sectors, chemicals, glass, automotive, are grappling with higher costs, cutting into profit margins. Meanwhile, Germany's automotive leaders like Volkswagen and BMW face new challenges from shifting consumer preferences for electric vehicles, fierce global competition, and their own emissions scandals. This perfect storm has led to a wave of bankruptcies, particularly among SMEs, the Mittelstand that forms the backbone of the nation's economy. Politically, this has fueled support for the far-right alternative for Germany, AfD. The AfD questions Germany's role in the EU and demands a return to a national currency, stoking fears of a so-called Dexit. Although mainstream parties maintain a firewall against far-right influence, the deepening economic crisis has opened space for populist rhetoric. In the midst of these upheavals, Chancellor Olaf Scholz's governing coalition collapsed in late 2024 after internal disputes, triggering snap elections. The political scene is more polarized than ever, with the AfD courting high-profile endorsements, even from figures like Elon Musk, who provocatively tweeted, "Only the AfD can save Germany." This endorsement rattled the political mainstream, underscoring the extent of external influence and deep public frustrations. While the spotlight often lands on Trump's loud tariff proclamations, Beijing has been orchestrating a far more subtle yet potentially more damaging strategy against Western economies. In December 2024, China banned the export of critical minerals like gallium, germanium, and antimony, materials vital for semiconductors, military hardware, and high-tech manufacturing. Prices skyrocketed, leaving Western industries scrambling to find new sources. But that was just the beginning. By early 2025, China floated tighter licensing rules for advanced lithium processing technology, specifically the specialized sorbent used to extract lithium from brine, crucial for producing high-capacity electric vehicle batteries. Major Chinese firms like Jiangsu Zhiyuan High-Tech suddenly halted exports, citing the possibility of new government controls. As the world's biggest processor of lithium, China holds over 60% of refining capacity, making it the dominant supplier of battery-grade lithium carbonate and hydroxide. This is no small matter. Global automakers rely on that refined lithium to manufacture next-generation EVs. Without Chinese sorbent technology, US-based oil giants and car makers seeking new domestic lithium supplies will struggle to scale up. Beijing doesn't have to broadcast these moves loudly. By quietly suspending or delaying export licenses, it can disrupt Western EV roadmaps, slow their progress toward carbon neutrality, and even hamper defense technologies that rely on advanced batteries. Already, some top contracts between Chinese sorbent manufacturers and Western firms are on hold, awaiting clarity on Beijing's final stance. Analysts compare this tactic to a choke point strategy. Rather than a sweeping ban, China effectively wields a hidden lever, choosing which technologies to share or withhold. If this pattern continues, Western automakers, renewable energy projects, and even consumer electronics firms may be forced to revamp their supply chains, or face losing access to the building blocks of modern industry. Alongside the resource wars over metals and minerals, an equally critical battle is unfolding in artificial intelligence, AI. Despite facing stringent US export controls on advanced semiconductors, China has displayed remarkable ingenuity and tenacity. A stark example is the emergence of an AI platform named DeepSeek, founded by Liang Wenfeng in 2023. DeepSeek rapidly became a global conversation piece because it managed to deliver a 600+ billion parameter open-source AI model, DeepSeek R1, on hardware that was believed to be subpar by Western standards. To circumvent the US clampdown on chips like the NVIDIA A100 or more advanced GPUs, Chinese startups adopted a mix of measures, stockpiling older GPUs, reverse engineering certain parts, and even utilizing offshore shell companies to indirectly obtain restricted components. The fact that DeepSeek's model competes head-on with some of the largest Western AI systems raised eyebrows in Silicon Valley. One immediate result: technology stocks, including those of major chipmakers, took a hit amid fears that US export controls might be less impactful than anticipated. With Washington pushing to stifle China's access to advanced semiconductor equipment, Beijing has responded with a blend of open defiance and behind-the-scenes maneuvering. The success of DeepSeek underscores how challenging it is to freeze another major power out of high-level innovation. And while the US focuses on limiting China's semiconductor capabilities, Beijing's broader approach, locking down resources like gallium and advanced battery technology, illustrates a more holistic economic strategy. Control not just the final chips, but the raw materials and processes that fuel modern tech infrastructures. The combined effect of these overlapping conflicts, US tariffs, Europe's energy crisis, Canada's diversification push, and China's quiet technology clampdown, promises to reshape our understanding of supply chains. First and foremost, energy markets feel the strain. In North America, the US depends on Canada for over half of its foreign crude oil supply. Any retaliatory move by Ottawa, such as cutting exports or slapping new export fees, could spike US gas prices. Similarly, states like Michigan and New York, which rely on Canadian electricity imports, might face high utility bills if Canada decides to wield its power exports as a bargaining chip. Across the Atlantic, Europe's shift away from Russian gas has not been easy. Some countries are eagerly pursuing Canadian liquefied natural gas, LNG, or new pipeline routes through North Africa, while also accelerating renewable projects. But these transitions can't be done overnight, leaving Europe vulnerable to shortfalls or price shocks. And the vulnerability exacerbates existing economic downturns, particularly Germany's. If Germany enters deeper recession, it has ripple effects across the entire EU, possibly igniting renewed skepticism about the bloc's economic arrangements or currency stability. Meanwhile, in the EV revolution, automakers worldwide must contend with potential shortfalls of refined lithium, nickel, or cobalt. If China fully turns the screws on advanced lithium processing exports, factories in the US or Europe may stall, undermining climate goals and allowing China to further consolidate its lead in battery technology. That lead bleeds into defense. Advanced battery tech is essential for the next generation of unmanned vehicles, portable power stations, and even directed energy weapons. Finally, the synergy between AI and resource control can't be overlooked. Semiconductors require the very materials China has restricted. And high-end AI development depends on reliable, powerful computing hardware. A prolonged shortage of specialized minerals would slow Western AI progress, potentially creating a situation where China's AI ecosystem continues to surge ahead, despite US chip restrictions. Beyond trade and energy, the defensive posture of Europe has taken center stage. Multiple EU leaders worry the United States might cut a unilateral peace deal with Russia that overlooks European security concerns, especially regarding the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. French President Emmanuel Macron has spearheaded meetings to bolster a cohesive European stance, involving countries like Canada, Norway, Greece, and the Baltic states in defense discussions is part of an effort to broaden buy-in. Some countries, like Poland and the Baltic Trio, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, insist on a robust stance against Russia, calling for more concrete military commitments. Others, like Italy or Spain, prefer a balanced approach that leaves room for diplomacy. Germany finds itself in a precarious spot. Historically tied to both American leadership and Russian energy flows, it now must redefine its role within a fractious Europe. While NATO officially remains a bedrock of transatlantic security, quiet questions persist about Washington's reliability under President Trump. The EU's Permanent Structured Cooperation, PESCO, and European Defence Fund are early steps toward an autonomous defence policy. Yet to truly stand on its own, the EU would need to harmonise military spending and unify strategic doctrines, no small task for a bloc of 27 different member states. And if the US continues forging separate peace paths with Russia, Europe's impetus to create a robust, independent defence framework will only intensify. The world has entered a period of overlapping disruptions. The United States' combative trade agenda under President Trump, aimed at rebalancing deficits and asserting dominance, has triggered retaliatory actions from friends and rivals alike. Canada, once deeply integrated with the US market, is pivoting rapidly to Europe and Asia, seeking to diversify exports from energy to high-tech services. The European Union, grappling with internal economic crises, especially Germany's downturn, also faces external challenges, as Washington's unpredictability over trade and defense rattles continental unity. Meanwhile, Beijing deploys a quieter but arguably more potent strategy, constraining exports of critical minerals and advanced lithium processing technology. This move could send shockwaves through the global electric vehicle industry and hamper Western ambitions to expand renewable energy quickly. Each of these actions, in isolation, would be significant. Together, they amount to a rewriting of the post-World War II economic order. Allies and adversaries alike are rethinking supply chains, who they buy from, who they sell to, and how to guard against future disruptions. For Western companies heavily dependent on China's specialized know-how and raw materials, the path forward involves rapidly exploring new technologies, forming multi-regional partnerships, and building fresh production lines to break free of single-source dependencies. In the near term, disruptions may lead to costlier products, reduced consumer choices, and uncertain job prospects for industries caught in the crossfire. Over the long term, we could see a more geographically diverse yet fragmented world, where multiple competing blocs refine their own systems for technology, energy, and trade. As each player maneuvers for advantage, through loud tariffs or quiet but effective export controls, one reality is clear. The road ahead promises to be as turbulent as it is transformative. Thank you for watching. If you found this analysis insightful, please hit the like button, subscribe for more in-depth updates, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's keep the conversation going as we track these pivotal shifts in our global economy.